Hey guys, welcome back to Cult of Film. I'm your man Kyle. Today I wanted to kind of switch gears. We've been doing a lot of horror over the month of October, and obviously it's a genre that is near and dear to my heart. But I don't want us to be kind of a one-trick pony here on the channel because there's so much great film out there that's been made. And one of the things, if you know anything about me and my channel, is while I am born and raised Chicago dude, I have spent coming up next year about a decade in LA, splitting time between my hometown of Chicago and LA, as I am a screenwriter, aspiring director, and I have been an actor since around 2007. But part of the reason I want to share that with you is because I want to cover some of the what I think are some of the best LA films out there. I mean, these are films that are, they're set in LA, they're about LA. They're uniquely, in one way or another, LA films. Some of them are going to be much lesser known, and obviously we've got some real heavy hitter sort of Hollywood studio films that some you probably know of, others you probably don't. A few flew under the radar, even some recent ones that I think are worth watching. And first and foremost, I don't have a specific list for this, but anything starring Humphrey Bogart from like the late 30s through the 40s really is worth watching. Now, not all of his films were LA, but he did quite a few noir films. A lot of LA noir films were sort of vaguely California LA noir films in the 30s and 40s. At least one, I think, called Dark Passage, was set in San Francisco. But Bogart, to me, he really is that noir feel, and I feel that that LA noir is such a beautiful genre within film, and so you'd be hard pressed to pick a bad one where Bogey's concerned. So definitely check out anything from Bogart from his heyday, because it's great stuff. Now into my specific selections for this list. The first one is Chinatown from 1974, directed by Roman Polanski, starring Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway. Nicholson plays a private detective who is hired by Dunaway basically to watch her husband and check on his indiscretions. And as he is working, he gets drawn into a much deeper, larger web of corruption and sort of seedy underworld goings on in 1940s LA. It was inspired by the California water wars, which, if you know anything about LA history, in the early 20th century, LA was fighting really hard to get water rights, because LA is basically a city built in a desert. The only thing we really have in terms of where we pull our water is the Colorado River. And so in order, I think, for a lot of LA to be incorporated and certainly to expand, they needed water rights in order to call themselves a city or to expand the city. And there was a lot of I guess, under the table stuff going on, to say the least, to secure a lot of these water rights. But that's sort of the background for Chinatown. Chinatown, again, directed by the controversial but brilliant Roman Polanski. I won't get into Polanski's past and his story. It's not important. Chinatown as a film, as a work of art, is just incredible. It is Jack Nicholson in his prime, and we know that he only got better. Same with Faye Dunaway. Done in the 70s and 74, they really did a beautiful job of portraying what I guess 1940s Los Angeles would look like. Obviously, I wasn't there, but it has that sort of auteur grit that a lot of 70s films had. At the same time, it's applied to a gritty noirish time era in LA, and it really, really works. It feels so grounded and real. At the same time, it's really stylish and beautiful, incredibly well acted, well written, well shot. It is an absolute masterpiece, and you definitely should watch it. Next one is a film called Boulevard Nights from 1979. Boulevard Nights it's got an 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that I necessarily put tons of weight in what Rotten Tomatoes says. Sometimes I agree with them, and sometimes I don't. There's a few films that I think they aren't necessarily rating poorly, they just haven't been reviewed enough. But Boulevard Nights it's a 1979 neo-noir hood and crime film. And when I say hood film, I don't mean that in any disparaging way at all. It is set in East LA, and there aren't a ton of films that are set in East LA. We've got tons of movies that are set in Los Angeles, but maybe less than a handful of what I think are really, really well done films set in East LA. And, that has to do with, I think, the fact that, just historically, the studio system views East LA and Chicano culture in a particular light, which I guess is getting better now, but historically just hasn't been great. Anyway, Boulevard Nights, it's about a family in East LA, and specifically two brothers. You have Raymond and Chuco. Raymond he's sort of the straight guy, has a job, he's engaged to be married. And you have Chuco, who is a drug user and a gang member. And there is this sort of pull to be kind of sucked into a gang war in East LA. While this movie is a beautiful noir or neo-noir, however you want to put it, it's one of those movies that I kind of get lost in, much like Chinatown, because it is so beautifully shot. It captures a feel of LA that we don't often see. Now, I think you could make the criticism that why is it that every film that centers on Chicano people in LA, why does it always have to be gang affiliated? I don't know. People like gang movies. They like crime films. There are more stories certainly within the Chicano world that can be told that aren't gang related. If you guys have them, please mention them in the comments below. There is sort of an uneasiness around films like Boulevard Nights. Even when it came out, there was extra security added to certain theaters because of gang activity and so on. And, I personally don't think it glorifies gang life any more than a lot of other gang films. I think it's just a really good movie. I think it's a beautiful representation of sort of working class Chicano people. It's heavy at times. It can be hard hitting and heartbreaking, but it's beautifully acted. It is beautifully acted, beautifully written, actually by a third generation Japanese American. A guy named Desmond Nakano wrote this film. And again, he knocked it out of the park. The shots of Whittier Boulevard, which if you know anything about LA and driving the boulevard, it's where so much of LA culture, and specifically Chicano culture, of lowrider culture, takes place. Obviously, Chicano culture isn't just in East LA or Los Angeles. It's sort of statewide and it's even in other cities. But I feel like it sort of got its start in East LA. And so you see so much of that, and you see it in the 70s. It's sort of akin to, it's less silly than The Warriors, which is also came from 1979 about gangs in New York. It's much more grounded. I feel like it's a lot more real. It has a lot more heart to it, but it has that tail end, gritty, grounded 70s feel. And it's a beautiful time capsule. And what I think is so interesting is how much of the aesthetic culture of Chicano culture looks the same, with, the style of dress and the love of 50s cars and romantic love songs, all those things. It was the same in the 70s. It was the same in the 90s. It's the same today. It's really beautiful. As a guy who drove rideshare in LA when I first got here and got so exposed to all the different parts of LA, East LA and Chicano people in general are without a doubt my favorite. When I got here, I wasn't in a really great headspace. I had come out of a long-term relationship back in Chicago, and I knew people, but I didn't know people. Being an actor out here is just really tough. It's just a tough business in general. And driving in places like Boyle Heights, Lincoln Heights, Alhambra, being out in these areas, Whittier, driving Whittier Boulevard, it was one of the few places that I was made to feel like a human being, if that makes any sense. Once I crossed La Brea in LA, they kind of just treat you like the help. but Chicanos, I mean, going all the way down to like Huntington Park. I remember I must have looked really ragged one day. I picked up a young lady in Hollywood, drove her home to Huntington Park, and she said, "Can you please wait?" I'm like, "Oh, sure." I figured maybe she needs another ride. And she brings to me homemade tamales. She's like, "You look like you were hungry." I'm like, "Oh, amazing." So I have a real soft spot in my heart for Chicago culture and for movies like Boulevard Nights. This is just, it's a gem of a movie and you should watch it. So definitely check that as well. My next, give me a second here, guys. I'm not going to say too much about this next one because we've already done an entire video about it, me and Justin. Blade Runner, 1982, set in 2019 LA, obviously a absolute neo-noir classic that just happens to be set in the future or a future Los Angeles. And yeah, not much more I can say about that other than it's a real gem of a movie. It's an absolute masterpiece, and it is technically an LA film. Next one after this is a real fun one, and I don't think we've discussed this one at all, is 1984's Beverly Hills Cop, starring Eddie Murphy, and it was the movie that launched Eddie Murphy to sort of international stardom. It is another one of those movies that, for as funny as it is, and for as much as we get to see Eddie flex his personality and be him, and being the him that we all love, it's also shot like a crime movie. It really has that sort of mid '80s grit, along the lines of other films like that I'll mention later. But it is absolutely a comedy. It is also absolutely a compelling sort of crime story. It's basically Eddie Murphy plays the legendary Axel Foley, who's a Detroit cop who ends up getting pulled to Beverly Hills to investigate a murder. And I won't say any more than that if you've never seen it. I enjoyed Beverly Hills Cop 2. I remember seeing Beverly Hills Cop 3 as a kid. I don't remember any of it. And I know that Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, that's just dropped on Netflix. I haven't seen that either, so I'll have to catch up on those. But the one that started it all is Beverly Hills Cop, 1984. Worth your time. It's just a fun movie, fun '80s movie. Next one is To Live and Die in LA. This might be the first episode I think we ever did of Cult of Film, me and my buddy Truman. I had never seen this particular William Friedkin film, which I'm kind of ashamed to say because he's one of my favorite directors. But this is one of the Friedkin five that I think are absolute incredible works of Friedkin's that everybody should watch. To Live and Die in LA, it's absolutely Friedkin, and at the same time, it is absolutely 80s. This is the movie where that sense of, it's like, oh, the cop who's coming up on retirement, and he is literally, quote, getting too old for this shit. I believe that line came out of this film. So much of what would be repeated as sort of like the cop trope in cop films started in this movie. It's incredible how many copies there are of so much of the premise and dialogue was essentially stolen from To Live and Die in LA. It also has an incredible 80s soundtrack by Wang Chung, I don't know if you call them, I guess they'd be a pop group from the 80s. It really works. It's so interesting. You watch this movie and it absolutely has a Friedkin feel to it, but it was an adjustment for me because it's so 80s and has such an 80s sound. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's good 80s. It's not cheesy, stupid 80s at all. It also stars, the lead is William Peterson, Chicago's very own William Peterson. We're very proud of him. He's one of the best actors to come out of Chicago, and certainly one of the best actors I think this country's ever produced. He worked a lot in the 80s. He did To Live and Die in LA in '85, and then in '86 he did Manhunter, directed by the great Michael Mann, also a Chicago guy. So he was crushing it in the 80s. To Live and Die in LA is as pretty to look at as it is to watch. It's basically about a guy. He works for the Secret Service. I believe it's the counterfeit division, and he is kind of corrupt. And he's got where his partner, sort of straight-laced and just trying to rat out the clock to his retirement. And so these two are very diametric opposites, which makes for a good dynamic. And I won't say more than that, other than Willem Dafoe is in this movie as the antagonist, and he just crushes it. This movie is so good. This movie includes the LA version of the car chase from Friedkin's first, I should say, his first big film, The French Connection, where, if you know anything about The French Connection, there is an absolutely insane car chase in the French Connection that goes through, I believe, the heart of the Bronx. And there's a whole story behind the insanity, how they managed to get that car chase done. You know, he had friends that were cops, he had friends that were criminals, and pulled off this incredible scene. Well, he does it again, only in LA, in To Live and Die in LA. And man, it's just, this movie is just, it's beautiful, it's noirish, it's brooding. It's just so, it's a sign of LA that we don't see. So much, I think, of LA filmmaking gets incredibly lazy. It's all Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Venice Beach, and that's it. And that's a very, very small percentage of LA, which is a massive, sprawling city region. You know, it's a city and a county. It's just, it's massive. And we don't get to see sort of that, again, brooding, dark but colorful, if that makes any sense, sensibility from this movie. So To Live and Die in LA, 85, William Friedkin, absolute masterpiece, worth your time. Miracle Mile, 1988. This stars Anthony Edwards, who was, those of you who remember the TV show ER, he was in ER for like, I don't know, 10 years or something like that. Before he became a big deal on TV, he did a film called Miracle Mile, which is another beautiful 80s time capsule movie set in LA, specifically around Fairfax and Wilshire. A lot of it is set in the old Johnny's Coffee Shop, which is still there. It's now a landmark because it is an absolutely beautiful piece of mid-century modern architecture. Basically, the plot premise of Miracle Mile, he is Anthony Edwards. He's playing a sort of a young musician, and he ends up going to the La Brea Tar Pits. He meets a young woman, Mare Whittingham, played by Mare Whittingham, and they kind of hit it off, and they decide to go on a date, and he forgets to set his alarm. He misses it, and just by virtue of the fact that his alarm doesn't go off, he ends up getting up, and he walks down to Johnny's Coffee Shop to try to make a phone call and to apologize. And while he's hanging at Johnny's Coffee Shop, he gets a phone call from someone's son who happens to work for the military at NORAD. And he thinks the guy calling thinks he's called his dad, who lives in LA or somewhere. He misdials. Anthony Edwards gets this call just on a random payphone. And this young man has basically said, "Dad, they did it. They launched." Now, he doesn't know if this is a prank or did someone launch, and is the world about to go into nuclear war. So great premise. It is a really, really good thriller. It's another great 80s time capsule, a lot of 80s style, also with kind of harkens back with the noirish sort of feels to it. The nighttime shots are really great. Absolutely a fun movie. It's usually streaming free on Tubi. You can usually find it somewhere streaming, probably with ads, but it's another just fun movie that does not unfold the way you expect it to. It really plays against expectations, but in a really fun way that it doesn't disappoint at all, but it also doesn't play by the rules, if you will. Blood In, Blood Out. Oh, 1993, directed by Taylor Hackford. Blood In, Blood Out, if you don't know it, is basically Chicago Shakespeare. It is an absolutely sweeping epic of a film that just happens to be set in East LA around three friends, and it follows them basically from about the early to mid 70s through about the mid to late 80s. You know, these are young guys that don't necessarily have strong father figures in their lives, or don't have a whole lot of just guidance in general. You know, so they want to do the right things. They kind of get caught up in gang culture, like, you know, happens in a lot of major cities, whether it be LA or Chicago or New York, Detroit, what have you. And man, the three leads in this film, let me try to pull these guys up here, because it is some of the best acting I've ever seen, and it really annoyed me that these guys really did not get that I can tell. The breakout star was Benjamin Bratt. Benjamin Bratt plays one of the three guys, but you also have incredible performances by Damian Chapa, Enrico Castillo, Jesse Borrego. This is a really, really good movie. There apparently is a 3-hour director's cut that I didn't even know existed until I ordered it on DVD for a family member, and we were watching it, and I'm like, wow, there's so many more scenes that I just didn't remember. I'm like, I don't remember it being this long. I mean, I didn't mind it at all. It was just more great stuff. But yeah, there's about a 3 hours director's cut out there that is, again, this is a sweeping epic of a film. I don't think it ever gets called an epic because I think people are, narrow-minded. They think it's some gang movie or whatever it is, but it's so much more than that. And it's Damian Chapa. He has basically a cult following as the character Miklo Velka. When I have a real connection with that name. When I moved to LA, I made some great friends that are, we're still tight to this day. They're just Mexican dudes that sort of embraced me, and I was called Miklo because Miklo, the character of Miklo, he's half Mexican, but he's half white, and so he's got lighter hair and light eyes, but he's a vato. Vatos Locos are the gang in there, and yeah, it's pretty cool when I first moved to LA to be so embraced by these locals, great guys, and so I've been Miklo for almost a decade now. But yeah, Miklo is a fun character. Basically, I'll kind of give you a quick synopsis. In 1972, after a violent confrontation with his abusive father, Miklo Velka, a teenager of half Mexican descent, leaves Vegas for East LA. He moves in with his cousins Paco and Cruz, who are members of the Vatos Locos gang. Miklo joins the gang following an attack on their rivals, the Tres Puntos. Tres Puntos retaliates by attacking Cruz, permanently damaging his back. When Vatos Locos counterattack the next day, Miklo kills Spider, the leader of the Tres Puntos. Fleeing the scene, Paco crashes their car. Both he and Miklo are arrested, and that sort of sets the course for them being incarcerated and really just going deep into crime, into drugs, but it's not just that. There's some course corrections that go on there. I won't tell you which characters, but it is a really beautiful story just about the human condition, and I think it's a cautionary tale about what so many men have gone through in their lives with regard to not having strong father figures, not having the right guidance in their life, and what can happen when you either don't have somebody to explain to you and show you why it's better to be on the straight and narrow, than other types of living. Again, I love this movie. Don't be scared by the runtime. It's absolutely worth watching. And again, a favorite of mine. I think I've seen this movie 7 times in my life. Next one is Heat, 1995, directed by Michael Mann. If Michael Mann, Chicago's very own Michael Mann, proud of him, he's a son of Chicago. If Michael Mann directing both Al Pacino and Robert De Niro isn't enough, and Val Kilmer, isn't enough to get you to watch Heat, I don't know what more I can say. People were really excited for this film. I remember as a kid, when people were saying, everybody wanted to see Pacino and De Niro in a movie. There's always talk about, who's better. Would they be allies? Would they be adversaries in a movie? And then in '95, we got Heat, which is a true ensemble neo-noir starring Pacino, De Niro, and Val Kilmer, directed by Michael Mann. Basic quick synopsis here. The film follows the conflict between an LAPD detective played by Pacino and a career thief played by De Niro, while also depicting its effect on their professional relationships and personal lives. It really is a character study of these two guys. And what's beautiful is how so many aspects of their lives kind of intersect, how there is a level of, some level of respect, even though they're on opposite sides of the law, some level of, could these guys be the same guy? It's almost as if they might be the same person. You're getting this look of if you had gone this way or if this guy had gone that way, kind of a sliding doors situation. And man, it's just, again, it is Michael Mann at his best. it's literally, if you were to take Michael Mann's Thief from 1981, which is one of my favorite movies ever, in my top 5 all time, and expanded everything that was great about that movie to an ensemble cast. Again, you can't lose. Absolutely, see Heat. See all these movies before you die. It's great. Next up is L.A. Confidential from 1997. This movie, I believe, won a ton of Oscars. It's a murderer's row of actors. You have Russell Crowe, you have Guy Pearce, Kevin Spacey, Kim Basinger, James Cromwell, and this is again one of those movies, again set in 40s LA, neo noir, police action thriller, corruption, femme fatale, just the whole shebang, but done with a major movie studio budget in the 90s. And it's beautiful. It's really high. Rotten Tomatoes has it as a 99%. That's a near perfect movie for Rotten Tomatoes, and I would absolutely agree. You cannot go wrong with this movie. It's again infinitely rewatchable, like everything on this list, and you should check it out. This next one is absolutely in my top 5 of all time. Might be in my top 3. And that is Drive from 2011, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, starring Ryan Gosling, Carey Mulligan, and Bryan Cranston before he became Walter White. Also, Christina Hendricks, Ron Perlman, Oscar Isaac, and the great Albert Brooks. Speaking of incredible LA talents, Sons of LA, LA filmmakers, Albert Brooks. Man, watch all his stuff. He's so great. And he actually plays the villain in this movie. He plays a really tough mob boss in this movie, and he's absolutely brilliant at it. The movie centers around Gosling, who basically plays an unnamed Hollywood stuntman who by night works as a getaway driver. He doesn't use a gun. He's just really, really good at what he does, which is driving. This movie is based on a novel of the same name, which I have read, which is also excellent. The novel sort of works out of sequence, but is also, it's a fun read. And there's a sequel to it called Another Drive that's also worth reading. Always wanted a sequel to this movie, but I think too much time has passed. That's 2011. It's been a minute. I don't know if they can do it now, but great movie, excellent movie. This is some of the most subtle and brilliant acting I've ever seen, and that comes from Ryan Gosling in this film. I remember when it first dropped, I completely dismissed this film. I was like, okay, blonde, Hollywood pretty boy, yeah, looks really cool on the poster. Fuck that. And then a few years later, I'm like, okay, this looks interesting, I'll watch it. And it's right up there with Blade Runner for me in terms of just absolute masterful movies, absolute movies everyone should see, absolute perfect LA noir, neo-noir films, the sort of 80s-ish kind of soundtrack that the film has. Again, very, very noir. Again, neighborhoods, angles, and places that we never see really in a lot of LA movies, because again, it's always the friggin' beach or Hollywood or West Hollywood or Venice or Santa Monica. And we don't get a ton of that in this film, which is great. It's one of Nicholas Winding Refn's, I think, one of his best films. I really hope he gets back to doing more features. I've enjoyed the Netflix series that he did and the super long, it's 12 episodes. They call it a series, was it Too Old to Die Young? It's basically a really long movie. And I kind of feel like, as much as I enjoyed that, I do think his place really is in film. He's a big, Winding Refn is a big fan of William Friedkin. And there's so much of that sort of 70s grit, 70s independent auteurship in Refn's in his films, whether it be Bronson, whether it be Drive, whether it be hang on a second, I'm blanking on his filmography here. Valhalla Rising, he started with the Pusher trilogy, which is a crime trilogy out of Copenhagen, Denmark. He did The Neon Demon, one of the best horror films I think that's ever been made. And Where the hell is it? Only God Forgives. That's one people sleep on. Damn, people watch that one as well. But watch Drive first. Watch Drive and then watch all of his other stuff. It's great. I wish he would come back to film. He really is. He is the scion of William Friedkin, as far as I'm concerned, and that's high praise. They're both such incredible talents. Next one is Gangster Squad from 2013. This movie was pulled shortly, I think, either before it was scheduled to come out, or it was pulled shortly after it debuted because of, unfortunately, due to a mass shooting. Gangster Squad is an action thriller from 2013 directed by Ruben Fleischer, written by Will Beal, and it's based on a nonfiction book by Paul Lieberman. Murderer's row of actors: Josh Brolin, Ryan Gosling, Nick Nolte, Emma Stone, Anthony Mackie, Giovanni Ribisi, Robert Patrick, Michael Pena, and Sean Penn as the big baddie. He plays Mickey Cohen, this mob boss in LA. It's set in 1949. Basically, a group of real-life LAPD officers and detectives called the Gangster Squad are assigned to basically bring down this kingpin of Mickey Cohen, played by Sean Penn. This is another one of those movies it's really in. It would be a great double feature with LA Confidential, or vice versa, because it has all that budget to create all of the beauty and style and aesthetics of the late 40s, early 50s in LA. And God, you can, not that I would say do this, don't watch it with the volume off, but you could do it. It's that pretty of a movie. Everybody acts their asses off in this film. Again, just an absolute murderer's row of actors. Some real fun moments. And what I like too is the cops aren't cutouts. It would be so easy to sort of just, play these guys sort of as these stereotype, archetypal characters that we are all sort of somewhat familiar with in what we think about, 40s, 50s crime movies. And it doesn't fall into any of those traps. Again, a testament to the people that made it. But yeah, unfortunately, this movie, I think, would have been so much bigger if they had not been cowards about pulling it due to, again, a really unfortunate event. But, I'm with Quentin Tarantino that movies don't turn people violent. They just don't. That type of violence is a cultural problem that needs to be solved. I'm not going to talk about that here, but, they undercut this movie and what would have been amazing success for this film had more people been able to see it. So if you like LA Confidential, if you like noir, neo-noir, Gangster Squad it's one of the best. It's so fun. This next one is a movie I actually was really hesitant to watch and then went and saw it, and it won me over. I'm not a big musicals guy. I'm not a big rom-com guy, but damn, La La Land from 2016, Damien Chazelle directing. He crushed it in this movie. I did not expect to react to this movie like I did, because it opens with Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone as sort of, he's an aspiring or struggling jazz musician. She's an aspiring actor in LA. And I could really relate to that. The struggle, the artist's struggle, and what it requires of you when you decide to go for it in LA. And LA is a very harsh, unforgiving mistress. And these are very difficult industries, livelihoods to try to, plant your flag in. And this movie captures all of that. But it also captures those beautiful musicals of, I guess, what would be the 40s, those sort of studio 1930s, 40s, 50s Hollywood musicals. The color of it, you look at the main poster for this film and you think, oh yeah, this could be, what is it, 1949, 50, 51. It really channels the spirit of those musicals, of sort of like that mid-century Hollywood or post-wartime Hollywood feel beautifully. Obviously, Emma Stone, Ryan Gosling, absolute beast actors, and they crushed in this movie. You feel things for these characters that even if you're not an actor, even if you hate artistic types, creative types, you can't help but really feel something from these characters and their situation. Again, it does not unfold the way you expect it to. It does play against expectations, but it works. And Damien Chazelle he's such a talented guy. I enjoy everything that he's done so far. And I like how he really goes for it. You know, if he wanted to, he could probably do a lot more practical films. And I'm glad that he doesn't, because La La Land, again, is a nice, beautiful piece of, while it is a rom-com, it's not a cheesy sort of formulaic rom-com. While it is a musical, it's not what most people experience as a musical or think of as a musical. And at the same time, it has so many neo-noir, beautiful tones and aspects that are a tribute to LA and its film past. So again, check this one out too. Last one. I don't think we've discussed any Tarantino films yet, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 2019, directed by the one and only QT. This is another one of his films. Like all his films, it is infinitely rewatchable. I think Tarantino's films are some of the most rewatched for me. The guy is he's such a genius, and he is so special. Partly because he's one of us, a guy who came up watching movies as a kid, as a teenager, worked at a video store, stored all of that knowledge, has absolute encyclopedic knowledge of film, of genre, of directors, of styles, and then turns around and becomes one of the greatest filmmakers this country's ever produced. And he doesn't apologize for the things that influence him. I love that he is so influenced and so loves so many of the B movies, so much grindhouse, so much independent film and foreign film, and how he sort of sometimes distills, and sometimes just outright just pulls those raw textures and premises into his films and does what he wants with them, elevates them every time, even beyond some of it, which some people could say, B movie schlocky, but he elevates it in a way that is so fun. And that's the thing is, Tarantino's movies, on top of having some of the best dialogue you'll ever see in a movie, on top of having such original shots and compositions, he indulges in the right things. But his movies are just fun. I remember when Kill Bill came out, it was as if I felt like he was talking just to me. Because I grew up watching samurai films and kung fu films. There was on local Chicago television when I was a kid was something called Samurai Sun. Was it Samurai Saturday or Samurai Sunday? I can't remember. But I absorbed all of that. And then I see this trailer for Kill Bill. I'm like, this dude is giving me the movie that I subconsciously always wanted. And yeah, he directed the living shit out of that movie and everything he's done since. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think, is his most heartfelt film. This is truly it is his love letter, not just to Hollywood, but it is his love letter to LA. And he has, quite a few movies that are set in LA or the greater LA area. This one in particular, again, this is him indulging himself in the best way possible, going into the nucleus of his childhood and producing just an absolutely beautiful, brilliant love letter, ode to his childhood and the things that he loves. And I'm so glad that we have people that do that, because I don't think we have enough. I wish we had more directors that were willing to indulge what influences them, indulge their loves and their passions in a way that is just a fun, interesting, great movie to watch. Of course, there are self-indulgent directors and writers, and it doesn't always work. But as far as I'm concerned, Tarantino does it every time. And it does make me sad that this next film of his, if he does one, will be his last, assuming he does do it. But the body of work is just incredible. And even if he stopped with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I kind of think it would be just a beautiful end cap. As I would love him to keep making movies forever. But what is he? He's 9 for 9, 10 for 10. If you count Death Proof, as far as I'm concerned, he's got no misses, no losses at all. So I could see, maybe going out on top. I just don't think the guy can lose, even if he continued on, but it's up to him. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is so good, it makes me remember the late 60s, early 70s childhood that I never had. You know what I mean? It pulls you into a way where, God, this feels, you realize how much of Hollywood culture and LA culture in the best way. The best parts of those cultures really are true Americana. So whether you're a Chicago kid like me, or you grew up in Arkansas or New York or Florida, you vibe with these guys. You vibe with DiCaprio and Brad Pitt's characters. You vibe especially with and more than I expected to, Margot Robbie's character. She plays young Sharon Tate, and that's probably the most heartfelt, I think, aspect of this movie is the Sharon Tate character. Because if any of you know the true story of Sharon Tate, she was a young, just on the rise, beautiful soul, incredible, beautiful actress that was, building her career and on the rise. And sadly and horrifically, her life was cut short, just in a terrible, terrible way, which I won't get into. And there's certain things that Tarantino does in this film where he focuses on the good and he focuses on what this is, despite the fact that there are some violence. Tarantino can't do a movie without some violence. Despite the fact that there are some violent scenes in this movie, this is absolutely his most benevolent film. I mean, truly. Anybody who, and again, I have no time for these people who just focus on the violence in Tarantino's films. You're missing the point. If you don't enjoy some of this violence, if some of this violence doesn't, affect you, then you don't know how to watch a movie. You're probably not much of a human being either. But this is his most heartfelt film. At the same time, it is such a guy film. And at the same time, it is such a love letter to Hollywood and Los Angeles. It's such a love letter to his childhood. And man, just if you haven't seen it, make time. It is, like everything Tarantino does, just an absolute masterpiece and just fun. Just fun. That's something that all of these movies are on this list. They're just fun and I feel are really good. And again, I know this isn't an exhaustive list of LA movies. This is just some of what I think are some of the best LA movies, just in my estimation. If there's anything that I've missed, please comment down below and let me know, because I'd love to see more like this or stuff that's sort of like in these universes. But yeah, check those out. I hope you guys enjoy them. And yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, like any of the others, please would humbly appreciate if you wouldn't mind hitting like, subscribe, and maybe even sharing these videos with other movie lover friends of yours. And I will see all of you in the next one. Bye-bye.